We're joined as well by Jon Meacham, a biographer of George H.W. Bush, somebody who knows his story as well as better than probably anybody else out there outside of the Bush family. Jon Meacham, I want to go back to 1980 with you because a major moment in George H.W. Bush's political career. He runs for president that year. He does better than expected in the Republican primaries, running against the overwhelming favorite, Ronald Reagan, even upsets him in the Iowa caucuses that year, but then falls short. And then at the Republican National Convention forms this, what at the moment, history now makes this look like it was inevitable, but at the moment, an unlikely alliance, George H.W. Bush teaming up with Ronald Reagan.
President Bush used to describe it as out of a blue, clear sky. The call came. The call for Bush to become vice president, without which he would not have been president, nor George W. Bush has told me would he have been president. So arguably one of the most pivotal moments in modern American politics came on the Wednesday night of the July convention in Detroit, when an attempt to put together what was called the dream ticket between then Governor Reagan and former President Ford fell apart. And it was not until, I think it was about 11:37 p.m. on that night when Reagan picked up the phone and called Bush. Jim Baker answered the call in the Bush Hotel suite. Bush had given up. It was all over, he thought. He'd addressed the convention earlier that evening. He had changed into a red polo shirt and was drinking a Stroh's, of all things, getting ready to figure out how to move on with life, when Reagan called, asked him two questions. Could he support the platform completely, and asked specifically about the pro-life part of the platform. Bush said absolutely. And the next morning, the two had coffee, the George H.W. Bush and Mrs. Bush with Ronald and Nancy Reagan. And as you said, Steve, it was a ferocious primary campaign. And though Ronald Reagan would forget those sorts of things, I think, as we all know, Mrs. Reagan never did. But one of the critical moments was at the end of the coffee, which was not wildly comfortable. Barbara Bush walked up to Ronald Reagan and said, "Governor, whatever reservations you may have, I just promise you this: we're going to work our tails off for you." And at that moment, Ronald Reagan was sold on the Bushes, and the two became as close of friends as Ronald Reagan would have in official life. Bush's vice presidency is really an interesting period. His role during the attempted assassination of President Reagan in late March of 1981 was a case of a statesman really being kind of like Fortinbras at the end of Hamlet. There'd been this chaotic afternoon. Bush had been in Texas. He flew back, and he walks into the Situation Room, and suddenly everyone feels that order has been restored. That was a product in many ways of his experience. He'd gone from the House to the UN, to the Republican National Committee, to China, back to the CIA, and had really run for president from a base, as he used to put it, of his friends and his Christmas card list. He had no natural political base. He never won a statewide race in Texas until the 1988 primaries. It was an unconventional political life, and I think that's something that's worth remembering. He rose to the top on a kind of quiet, persistent charisma. It's not a word you hear much associated with George H.W. Bush. You hear it with Kennedy, with Reagan, with Clinton, with Obama. But George H.W. Bush, if you met him, you were basically his for life. And he was one of the great retail politicians in American history.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.